But I know God saw my heart at that time. And I struggled with making friends. Felt like I was never good enough for somebody. I felt like I couldn't be loved. I never felt like I met this standard. And that's when a lot of doors that had been locked and closed for my entire life started to swing right open. We're not missing out on anything that is a blessing from God. I let myself love somebody in a way that I had never felt before. I met somebody someplace that I shouldn't have been. Hey guys, welcome to my first episode of the Journey After podcast. I'm so excited to be able to start this and to share. It's always been, I guess, a dream of mine to be able to do this one day, but I never thought I would actually do it. But God's given me this opportunity to share my story, to share my testimony, to make new connections that I thought I'd never get to make. And I am so grateful for that. Today, I want to introduce myself, share with you who I am, a little bit about my testimony and my heart behind this. And I hope you can tune in and listen to it, because I hope God can speak to you through this, and that me sitting here sharing this reflects just a tiny bit of His love and His mercy, His grace and His forgiveness and His truth, because His truth is the only truth. His way, the truth, the life. No one gets to the Father except through Jesus, and I want to be able to share that. I want to be able to reflect that. I just want to share about me, and it is hard to share about it sometimes because it is not pretty. It is dark. It is hard. It's sad, painful, and just so full of sin, my past. Every day, obviously, I'm not perfect and never will be. So it is a step-by-step, day-by-day journey in submission to the Lord. But it is hard, and I want you to know that. And I am grateful to have a merciful, loving God that can walk with me through that. I guess we'll just jump into my crazy testimony. But for me, growing up, I have an amazing, loving family. 2 parents. I've always been married from when I was born to now. Raised me and my brother in the church, and it was amazing. We learned about Jesus. We went to Sunday school, Awanas, all the things. But as a child, you kind of learn under your parents' faith, and that's where I was. I went to VBS. I would pray the prayer that they have you say, but I don't think I ever truly understood that. I don't think anyone at that age truly can. But I did, and I loved Jesus. I would talk about Him all the time. I would tell random people on my school bus coming back from elementary school about salvation and try to pray the prayer to get them saved. But that's just not how it works, and I know that now. But as a child, you don't really understand that. My heart obviously was coming from a pure place in that, but I was I thought I thought that's how it worked. But I know God saw my heart at that time and could bring Himself down to the level that I was at to know that's what I was doing. But middle school came around. It was hard for me. I went to a new school, had to make a whole new friend group, had a dress code that I wasn't used to, had a lot more homework that I wasn't used to, was around a lot of other kids that were really, really smart and really driven. And I struggled with that a lot. And, I didn't know how to navigate that as well, especially being around a lot of other teenagers that I wanted to be like, I guess, in a way. I struggled with making friends. I had a new boyfriend in middle school every week. And that caused a lot of conflict with me to make friends. And going into high school, I struggle with friendship again and with boys. I felt like I was never good enough for somebody. I felt like I couldn't be loved, that I wasn't pretty enough, that I wasn't fun enough, that I didn't dress the way that everyone dressed. I never felt like I met the standard of what everyone was there. And so it was hard, getting picked on, not getting invited to certain things. And I know there's so many people that may be listening, or even not, that can relate to that. And it's hard. It will always be hard. FOMO, I used to tell myself, was such a real thing. But now I also know that that's something so of the world. Because at the end of the day, we're not missing out on anything that is a blessing from God. And I can see that now. But yeah, going through high school was rough. Academics weren't really my thing. And so after my sophomore year of high school, I decided to do dual enrollment, finish my degree early, and COVID happened. So that kind of messed everything up for everybody. But I ended up graduating that year. And 2 weeks after, I went straight to hair school. And that's when a lot of doors that had been locked and closed for my entire life started to swing right open. And, I was exposed to a lot of stuff that I had never been around, never heard about. I was the youngest girl in my cosmetology class, and everyone else was a lot older, had a lot more life experience, hadn't been as sheltered as me growing up. And so I just ran. I ran right through it and kind of exploded and took every opportunity that I could to have fun, make friends, meet boys. I had my first relationship that year, and I clung to that. The breakup was rough because I let myself love somebody in a way that I had never felt before. And that's something that's so big on my heart now, too, for other young women, is at that age, one, was I even ready to love somebody in that way? Two, what were my standards then? I didn't have standards then. Because I had been hurt through those years of high school of not ever feeling good enough for the girls or the guys, I clung to the one person that I met that made me feel loved. And he was amazing. So our relationship at the time as high schoolers was a high school relationship. There was nothing more, nothing less of it. But it broke me. And, I didn't turn to Jesus after that. I just continued to push through, to now use other people in my life to fill that void of that hurt and that pain and that heartbrokenness. And so going through hair school, I started to really just run with everything. And hair school was such a hard year, honestly. I don't know if anybody else has done cosmetology stuff, but it was rough. And would I do it again? I don't know. If I knew what it was like before going into it, truly in the shoes of it, knowing, I don't know if I could have done it, because it was really hard. But that's beside the point. I finishing up hair school, getting a job at a salon, again, continued to open doors for me that I had never walked through before. And so I would go out. I started drinking alcohol. I started wearing outfits that I had never worn before. I started doing my makeup in ways that I had never done before. I started talking to people that I knew weren't good for me. But I did it because I was filling a void, but not filling it the right way. And so time went on. And coming out of hair school, having this new salon job, life was great. I thought everything was finally going good. I was having fun, I had friends, I had a great job. And then one day, I was at the gym and I dislocated my shoulder. Come to find out, I had to have shoulder surgery. And in those moments, I felt heartbroken again. I was so angry. For the past year and a half, I had worked so hard to get my cosmetology license, to get through hair school, to land a great job. And all of a sudden, it was ripped from right out underneath me. And I was so mad. What was I supposed to do? That void came back because the things that I had filled it with were so easily taken away. And so I turned to drinking. I would drink to help myself fall asleep. I would drink to go out and be able to have fun with people, to take away my physical pain, my emotional pain. And then I started meeting people. And that year, I met somebody, someplace that I shouldn't have been. And that relationship was really hard and caused a lot more brokenness for me than the previous one had. And so the void became bigger. The pain became stronger. And I just kept pushing into it, trying to fix it, trying to fill it on my own. I didn't think about Jesus. I didn't run to Jesus. I turned away from Jesus because I was angry. Because how could a good, merciful, amazing, loving God let me go through what I had went through? Because at the time, I wasn't going to take responsibility for my actions or responsibility for the people that I got in relationships with. That was on me. But I blamed God. And that year was one of the hardest years at the time for me. The sadness became stronger. The brokenness shattered more. And I felt more alone in my life than I ever had. I'd pushed my family away. I'd pushed the only good friends I had away. And I turned to somebody and clung on to them that didn't have a foundation to hold me up. And coming out of that season was really hard. I needed a lot of help. I wasn't able to do it on my own. God blessed me with a beautiful family. And as much anger and pain I had towards them for helping me get out of it, I'm so thankful for it. Truly. And I'm so thankful for the people that I met in that season of healing. There was a lot of therapy. There was a lot of uncomfortable moments where I had to reteach myself a lot with my brain and mental stability, but also love towards myself. But coming out of that, I yet again hurt myself. I had torn the labrum in my hip, and so I had to have surgery again. And the anger came back. The pain came back. The confusion. Why did this keep happening to me? Why did God let bad things continue to happen to me? And so I had to have surgery. I had to recover. I couldn't do hair again. I couldn't go out with my friends. So I sat there and I built up on anger and hatred towards the world, towards the people that had made my life miserable because of myself. And it grew. And then my bubble popped. I ran back to a lot of bad people that placed me again yet in bad situations. But again, at the time, I was so blinded to it because we never want to see our mistakes when we're in it. It's not till down the road after that we can hopefully one day take responsibility, take accountability. But that is hard. And that's something definitely that I would love to talk about, because that did not come easy for me. It was really hard for me to forgive and to walk away. And I can say I didn't do that the best or the most godly way sometime. And I can acknowledge that. But at the time, I did what I thought was best. And, I know God will honor my intention, even if it wasn't His will. But, anywho, back to my hip journey. I exploded that summer. I got in another relationship. I ran with it. I partied even more than I ever had before. I drank even more than I had before. I started using substances for fun, and I thought that was cool. My friends were doing it, and I woke up each day only to live for that night, only to get towards when I can get dressed up, do my hair, do my makeup, put on my heels and go out. That's what I lived for every single day, because I woke up and I hated my life. I hated how I felt. I hated having to communicate with people. I pushed everyone away that was nice to me because I couldn't stand to be nice back. I couldn't. I didn't have it in me. I was full of so much hate that there was no room for joy and kindness. And so the snowball kept piling up and rolling down the hill, thing after thing, night after night, boy after boy, drink after drink. It was a really dark period of my life. And I look back at it right now, and it hurts. It hurts to think about. It hurts to talk about. It's embarrassing for me to talk about. But I also know that it's a part of my story that's vulnerable, that needs to be heard. And so leading up to the fall, things escalated even more. It became every night, all day things. And the people, one after another, the friends, constantly engaging in the behavior that I was walking in, the actions that I was taking. But I loved it, or I thought I did, because I had nothing else. Well, one of the last nights of this crazy phase was the night that now I look at and know that I was dangling off the side of a cliff. And if I would have fallen off, I don't think I would have been able to climb back up. I truly believe God extended His hand out to me and allowed me to walk away from the edge that last month of making some really poor, hard decisions on my part. Right before Christmas that year is when I found out I was pregnant. And I was shocked. I couldn't get myself to wrap my head around that it was real. Staring at pregnancy test after pregnancy test after pregnancy test, and they all say positive. Your body kind of goes into a little shock. I was in my bathroom. I'd just gotten home from work, and I took it. I didn't think it was going to say positive. I really didn't. But it did. And that moment is when God reached His hand out and I walked away from that cliff. But I didn't see that then. I was scared for myself. I was scared to tell anybody, like my family. I mean, I was terrified to tell my parents. I didn't know what to do. How was I going to have a child at 21? How was I going to be about to be responsible for another human being's life? I wasn't married. The relationship around my child and his birth father was complicated. And I didn't know what to do. So weeks went by, and there was a lot of tears, a lot of morning sickness, and a lot of fear. But one day, I woke up, and I'm scrolling through TikTok, Instagram, and the same reel keeps popping up on my phone over and over again. And it was a video of Madison Pruitt-Trout, which I love her. Not that she would ever listen to my podcast, but if you do, Maddie, I love you. And because of your choice to walk in obedience, that blessed my life. So thank you. And love you. But I watched that video, and she was sitting there saying, one day we're going to have to take account for our life and be face to face with God. And either I'm going to have to sit there and say, I was too scared because I wanted to live by the world, or I was too scared because I didn't want people to make fun of me and I wanted to fit in. Or I can sit there and say, God, I did my best to make you proud. I did my best to wake up every day and live for you and tell everyone about you and reflect you. And then for him to be like, good job, I'm so proud of you. And so I watched her say this over and over and over again. And I started crying. Because in that moment, there was this fear that came up inside of me that if I were to die that moment, I wasn't sure if I'd be going to heaven. The decisions that I made daily, the posture that my heart was in, my mind, I wasn't walking in a lifestyle that reflected the Lord. I was walking in a selfish lifestyle that only satisfied me and what I wanted. And so I was like, whoa, what have I been doing? How am I supposed to change this? I was terrified. The fear of the Lord became real to me. And so I connected with my old senior pastor and his wife because I wanted some wise counsel. And I showed up on their doorstep, pregnant, and broke down to them and shared this with them. And I am so grateful for them. I look up to both of them so much and in such a high way. And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, too, is sit in front of my senior pastor and his wife, who have known me since I was 2, and tell them that I got pregnant out of wedlock. But you know what? He sat there and welcomed me with open arms. You know, one thing he mentioned is like, there is not one person that walks into the church that's without sin. Mine was just more visible. And I will forever love and appreciate and hold a special spot in my heart for that night. Because, you know, he spoke love and truth and wisdom to me. when he didn't have to. And that reflected God's love, grace, and mercy in such a beautiful way. We had some hard discussions after that, asking me, have you been saved? Can you confidently say that you have salvation? Whew. Let me tell you, that was hard for me to grasp because I was unsure of it. So I went home that night and I got right with my Creator. I gave my life back to Jesus that night. And I could feel the Holy Spirit back in me. And so as my pregnancy went on, things got harder. My baby bumps started to show more. And it was difficult. Every day I woke up sad because I could feel something hard that was going to have to happen. During my pregnancy, I explored the option about adoption. I didn't know what it was. To be honest, I thought adoption was foster care. Nobody really teaches you about adoption, which I feel like is so wrong. So I learned about it. I showed up to the agency, had caseworkers talk to me about it. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I left every meeting crying because I didn't ever want to envision having to place my child with another family. But it was a constant meetings, text messages, calls between them and I. And yeah, like I said, I hated it. As time went on, I kept pushing away the fact that I might have to do that. I explored every resource, every option that I could, because I just wanted to push away from what I felt like God was calling me to do. But he showed so many signs during my pregnancy, and I look at that now, and it's so beautiful because, he showed up. And I feel like God shows up in our lives so much, but we all want to deny it and say that he doesn't, or say that, oh, that wasn't God. But it was. Everything that lined up so perfectly was just a beautiful blessing from him. And about a little over halfway during my pregnancy, my family and I attended a pregnancy resource banquet. And we sit right there at that table in the very front. I didn't really want to be there, to be honest. But I know God placed me there for a reason. Well, that night, they had a speaker on. And the speaker was an adoptee that had grown up, got married, had children, and also adopted. And now he is a musician, an artist, and will go around and speak and share his adoption story. That night, he sang a song that he wrote for his birth mom that he had never met, but wrote to honor her, to thank her for giving him life. And I cried. I bawled my eyes out. Even still right now, if I hear that song, I cry. But God showed up. God placed him there that night. God placed me there. So I got to hear that. And then weeks down the line, I start going to different church events, meeting more friends and people. And one night, we're out at dinner. We had just went to a worship night, and I was very visibly pregnant at this point. I think it was probably close to 30 weeks. And I had met up with some friends that I hadn't seen in about 12 years from elementary school. And we're all sitting there, and someone asked me about my pregnancy. Like, are you so excited? Oh my gosh. Those questions were always very hard for me during pregnancy because I wanted so badly to be excited. But again, deep down internally, I knew that God was calling me to do something different. So they're asking me, and I start sharing, hey, like, I'm so grateful for my son. I'm growing a beautiful baby boy inside of me that I love so much. But I'm considering the option of adoption. And I was able to talk a little bit about how me choosing that option wasn't because I didn't love my child. It's because I loved him so much that I knew that God had a better life for him in store. And I'm sharing this story, and the girl across from me looks at me and is like, I was adopted. And you just made me feel so loved by a birth mom. And because she chose life for me and gave me the opportunity to live this amazing life, I've met Jesus. I have parents that love me, that took me to church growing up. And now on my Friday nights, this is what I do. And I sat there and I felt the Lord just like warm my heart and be like, this could be your son one day. He can grow up and live in a beautiful life. And there were so many moments like that happened, so many. And then the last month before leading up to when I was due, I took 30 days to do a specific journal entry where each day I'd wake up and I would write what I want and what I want my will for my life to be. And every single day I would write, I want to parent my son, I want to keep him, and that's it. And then underneath it, I would write what I feel like God's will for my life is. And every single day I wrote, I feel like God's calling me to place. After those 30 days, I was so mad. I didn't want to do it. But it was hard for me to deny the pull that God had on my heart. And so the last month leading up to my son's birth, it was time to make some hard decisions. It was time to pick a family. It was time to think about names if I wanted to name him. It was time to think about how hard this actually was going to be. And so I took some time again, looking through families, processing it all, thinking about it all. And I picked a family. And then a few days later, I get a call. And I was pretty dead set on this family too. And I get a call that from my caseworkers that they just don't think it's going to work out. And let me tell you, I was shocked. I was like, what? And I got angry. God, if you're calling me to do this, why is it not working out? Why is the plan not following through the way that I thought it was supposed to be? Am I not supposed to do this? I was so confused, and I felt I was standing in the middle of an intersection and I didn't know which way to go. Then I got another call. And this was like a week and a half before I gave birth at this point. And there was one last family that I could look at and meet if I wanted to. And I prayed about it. I just remember God being like, go meet this family. And so the night before, I wrote out a letter, basically sharing my heart, sharing my desires for my son, sharing a little bit about my testimony and my pregnancy journey. And I wrote that with intentions that if I were to pick to place with them, I would give that to them. But only if I felt God show up in that meeting. So I get up that morning and I drive there. I did my hair, my makeup. I wore a cute outfit. I was so scared. But I wanted, to show up for them and look like I was put together. I think a little bit of it was like insecurity, being like, I'm meeting them, they're not too much older than me, and I'm alone and pregnant. And that was hard. But I pulled in and I get out of my car and I start walking towards the door, and all of a sudden, like, I just stop and I start crying. And I can't get myself to move forward with it. And all in my head, I just keep telling myself, I'm not strong enough to do this. God, I'm not going to get through this. I have no strength right now. I'm so weak. I'm so scared. I can't do this. I'm all alone. And a verse came to me that growing up used to be my favorite verse, but I hadn't thought about it or heard it in years. And all I sit there saying to myself, hearing to myself, placed on my heart, was Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And I said that verse to myself out loud. I spoke that verse over me. And I walked through those doors. And I sat down and I met them. And they loved on me. They honored me. They respected me. And I loved them. And I knew at the end of that meeting, those parents were going to be my son's parents. Time comes to give birth. Ooh, and I was so scared. I had to have a C-section because of my hip problems. But we get there. I have my beautiful baby boy. And I named him. I held him. I loved on him. My family loved on him. And I got to spend that day with him. And it was the best day of my life. The best day. The following day was hard. The hardest day of my life. But in that, the hospital staff, my parents, other people there were able to witness what I hope looked just like a tiny bit of what God's love could look like. There was a lot of tears, a ripped apart piece of emptiness in me again that I had felt every time that something hard had happened in the past years. I felt it again, but this time worse, bigger. But I went home. I walked out of the hospital, still looking pregnant, being postpartum, without a baby to show for it. But I let Jesus this time try to fill back that void. Each day, waking up and feeling that was not fun. And I'm going to be completely honest. I wake up and I still feel that sometimes. A lot of times. But coming through being postpartum, still walking post-placement, God's been there with me every step of the way. I've witnessed now how he's worked in mysterious ways, especially with my pregnancy. And post-placement, I found out that the weekend that my son's adoptive parents announced that they were adopting was the same weekend when I got pregnant. And I'm sorry, but there is no denying that there is not a God. Like, I have no words, truly. Because what the enemy meant for evil that day, God meant it for good. And God had a plan in all of that. Over all the years of my life. Over the years that someone was praying for a child. God lined things up so perfectly to bless so many people. And I'm amazed. I'm in awe of that. And so I've seen God show up in my life. I'm a living proof that we serve a living God. And wow, like that is just so powerful. It doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't take away the loneliness. Some days it doesn't even take away the anger, the feeling of regret, the fear. But we also have to remind ourselves that those feelings are not from God. Those feelings are of the world. We live in a sinful world. And every action that we take, no matter if it's good, no matter if it's bad, it is going to have a flip side to it. Whether that's a consequence or a blessing, everything that we choose to do leads to something. And that night, me choosing to possibly get pregnant led to, having a baby and having to make a hard decision. My son is never a mistake and never a consequence. But the pain that I live with now is a consequence of pain on this earth because we live in a sinful world. That pain is not from God. That pain is not a punishment from God or condemnation from God. That pain is from the world because the world is broken. I've had people ask me before if they think that me getting pregnant was God showing mercy on me. And he allowed that to happen because he was showing mercy on me. And I question when people ask me that because no. God never would condone my sin. He would never choose the path that leads to sin and destruction for me. And so when people say that, I'm like, no. I truly believe that was not God's ideal path for me. But he knew that. He already knew that. before I was born, before I was even a thought of existence. He knew that path for my life was going to play out the way it did. Because I am human. I have the free will to choose and to not choose. And so God used that because he can use all things to bless other people and to show his love and reflect that. And so no, my pregnancy was not God showing mercy on me, but it was God's way of shining his forgiveness, his love, his grace, and his truth. And so, like I said, what the enemy meant for evil, God used it for good. And wow, is there so much good. Taking pain and trying to turn it into purpose is extremely hard. Walking in a life of sexual sin to trying to walk in a life of purity is really hard. Changing your lifestyle and habits, your friends, is really hard. Nothing is going to be easy for us in this world. But all things are possible through God. And he is who gives us strength. Because God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. And that's finally something that I can truly hold on to, value, and understand. And I'm so grateful for God. I'm so grateful he chose me, that he chose you, because he gave us these lives. And one day, I get to spend eternity with him, because I'm not living for my time here on earth. I'm living for my eternity in heaven. And so every day on this earth, I want to be a kingdom builder. I want to be building for the kingdom in heaven, not for the worldly kingdom. I don't want to conform with the world. I want to be different. And I want you to want the same thing. It is not an easy path, but it's a path that is made possible through the love and sacrifice of the Lord. And so, yeah, I know that was a long kind of discussion, but that's me. And that's a bit more of the vulnerable side of my testimony, the vulnerable side of my pregnancy story and adoption story. Like I said, it is a day-by-day thing. But support, godly support, wisdom and counsel from other people, accountability, love. That's what God blesses us in this world to get through. The hard things, the sinful temptations. And so you can do it. I am living proof that God uses all things for his good. I will never be perfect. My life will never be perfect. But I know whose I am. I know what I'm living for. And I know God wants me to share it. I keep telling myself it would be selfish of me not to share my testimony, because people shared me theirs in a time when I needed to hear it most. And I want to honor God in his statement of sending us out to make disciples. And so this is me trying to send out this message for you to come and know Jesus, for you to see that our God, the God, is real, and he loves you, and he created you with a purpose, with a design. And I want you to know that he doesn't look at where you've come from. He doesn't look at where you've been. He wants you to run to him with where you're going. And that's what I do. And that's what I want you to do. But thank you for listening. If you want to subscribe and stay tuned in for, release dates for more episodes, you can check out my website at thejourneyafterpodcast.com. You can also follow my Instagram page at The Journey After Podcast. Hopefully I'll make a TikTok soon. I don't know. We'll see. If you want to be a guest, I would love to have you on and host you. Under the Connect drop down on my website at thejourneyafterpodcast.com, there is a form you can fill out that gets sent directly to me, and I would love to get connected with you. I am currently only doing podcasts in person, not virtual. I am in the Charlotte area, so please reach out, please connect. I would love to have you on and host you, and I know you guys all would love to hear more stories. And as always, it is not where you've been or where you've gone or what you've done, but it's where you're going. This is The Journey After. Love y'all. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the Journey After podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Doherty, and I'm so excited to be starting this new podcast. I hope you enjoy the episodes. If you ever want to hear something specific, reach out to me on my website. Come be a guest. But stay tuned. I'm really excited to start this journey of where it's going to go, where it's going to take me. Because here on this podcast, we talk about where we've been, but we live in where we're going and where God's taking us. And so I hope you tag along and you follow me along as I start this. So thank you.